I guess the authors of the report on possible sumo reform assumed that no foreigners would ever read it. They were wrong, and I'd like to share the details with you here, tear a couple of them to shreds, and then ask you for your comments. So, this report serves two purposes. Firstly, to examine how sumo's traditions can be passed on and developed, even in a more cosmopolitan setting. Secondly, to set a general direction for sumo's unique governance code, which is somehow in line with the Japan Sports Agency's governance code set out in 2019. It's about a suitable form of sumo for the post-2019 Reiwa era, writes chief author Masayuki Yamauchi, a renowned historian. However, at 73 years old, he's actually the second youngest member of the 8-strong committee, whose average age is 77 and whose oldest member is 91. And while these figures have achieved great things in their respective business, legal, and artistic fields, they cannot be well placed to read the minds of foreign-born teenagers seeking a life in sumo, even more so without talking to them. The report starts with the premise that foreign-born wrestlers are not only an inherent threat to sumo tradition, but the biggest one around. While foreigners are interesting to watch, the report concedes, the behavior of some has caused unease among sumo lovers and fans and invited criticism. It later cites data showing that of the 110 cases of sumo violence made public since 1989, 77 have involved foreign-born men. And given these foreigners have never topped 9% of the sumo population, their majority share of the violence scandals, the report claims, is proof of just how badly they've let the side down. But as the writers themselves note, this data is only for the cases made public, and not covered up by, I must add, a tabloid media viciously biased against foreigners, especially those of East Asian descent. Did you see the headlines when Yuna Kim beat Mao Asada to figure skating gold? So when the writers say certain behavior invites criticism, they actually mean from those media outlets first, without whose slanted reporting most fans would never read of sumo violence to feel uneasy about. Dotted about the report are other examples of bad foreigner behavior. Mischievous moves, face slaps, post-match shoves come first, followed by the passage, wrestlers who pump their fist in victory, display their own country's flag during the title parade, and demand a banzai chorus from the fans during a title interview are not behaving as a Japanese rikishi should, and fans thus feel uneasy. Given it's most unlike Kakuryu to pump his fist, wave a flag, and say, "Everyone, sing along with me!" that must be a combined attack on Asashoryu and Hakuho. The latter also accused, not by name, of only going by his own clock at the tachiai and making no attempt to harmonize with his foe. So, while painting an apocalyptic image of unshaven, cha-cha-swilling Georgians sword-dancing arm-in-arm with riotous flag-waving Mongols atop the dohyo, the writers place sumo at a fork in the road and call upon the traditional Japanese arts of judo and kendo to describe the paths it may now take. Follow the judo path of dilution into other cultures, and sumo must bind the culture, history, and ideas of all its competing nations into a new set of rules, and become new-style sumo, which may even include weight divisions, robbing us of the thrills of an Enho-style upset, they claim. Follow the kendo path, however, and sumo can go on pretty much as now, except with more concerted efforts to convert foreigners to the beauty of Japanese form and style, and with the sporting aspect ranked second to human development. Even in an Olympic year, it should come as no surprise that these aging Japanese authors strongly recommend the latter. I don't wholly disagree, but I object strongly to their assumption that most foreigners in sumo are pushing day and night for the sport to reflect their birth country's culture. Many have lived in Japan for years prior to joining. Some of them know Japan's culture better than their birthlands. It doesn't follow they would seek to dismantle Japanese values. Why didn't this committee talk to some of these active wrestlers to reassure themselves? Then it might at least have grasped the need, when using the word foreign-born, to distinguish between short-term and long-term foreign residents, whose levels of cultural immersion differ wildly. Instead, all we have is a 1950s-style us and them. The report then talks about acculturation, how to get these undefined foreigners behaving in a more sumo-like way, which, we are told, is so wonderfully flexible it doesn't need to be specified. To start with, there must be no foreign coaches. The requirement that all coaches take Japanese citizenship must stay, say the writers, because they undertake a public role of upholding Japanese traditions and customs. This is apparently consistent with Sumo's Governing Rule 4.2, stating that the Sumo Association must develop the necessary human resources to uphold its traditions and system. Furthermore, coaches must not introduce their own foreign ideas into the sport, lest wrestlers in their charge, without a firm grasp of sumo, wonder what it actually stands for. Again, I'm unconvinced foreign coaches who've lived in Japan for 2 decades would even want to do that. Then, the writers link back to their earlier attacks on Hakuho with cold technical reasoning. Sumo elder stock, they claim, comparing it to esteemed names in kabuki and rakugo, is essential for passing on sumo traditions because it embodies the history, authority, and character of the art and the holder. The single-generation elder stock, granted to mark the achievements of Taiho, Kitanomi, Chiyonofuji, who rejected it, and Takanohana, and said to be granted to Hakuho, by its very definition, cannot be handed down. Therefore, they assert, it promotes neither a continuation of sumo values nor the sport agency buzzwords of sporting integrity. And, as it has never been formalized, the honor is at odds with modern sporting governance norms and should no more be conferred. The status of yokozuna is recognition enough of a man's achievements, they reason, and if he really wants his ring name on a stable, he can simply copy Futabayama, who nailed a Futabayama dojo board to Tokitsukaze stable. Firstly, may I take issue with their point about inheritance with this exhibit. In that highly explosive embodiment of sumo spirit, for whom was Takakeisho fighting? I guarantee, at least partly, for Takanohana. It matters not that Takanohana stock is gone along with the coach. What he did with it lives on in Takakeisho through every single bout. The claim that his sumo traditions died with the stock is wrong, and would also be wrong in the Hakuho case. And, flipping things around, the writers cannot suggest that the values held by the first Ise-no-umi in 1684 are the same as those of Ise-no-umi today. Societal change and progress inevitably cause stock to mean different things in different ages. The same name scarce guarantees a tradition will survive. When Musoyama turned pro, for example, his colleagues had spent the past 4 years in this building training to defeat the boys of Fujishima Stable. Now, that same building is Fujishima Stable, and he is Coach Fujishima. And it's daft identity changes like that, allowed by opaque elder stock trades, which harm sumo tradition as much as any foreign-born coach. But then tradition does not appear to be the writer's main concern here. They've already peppered this report with specific attacks on Hakuho, which portray him as unfit for stable master duty. They accuse him of lacking yokozuna leadership in recent years, attacking his absence record with the words, "A yokozuna's non-demotion principle should not be confused with the right to do sumo forever, regardless of results. And if he doesn't understand the weight of his rank, that's also his stablemaster's fault." The proposal to no longer award honorary elder stock is thus tailor-made to hurt him, even though he's one of their own. A Japanese national since 2019, resident for 20 years, yokozuna for 14. Treating him as an enemy is sheer madness. Labeling him unfit to teach even more so, given the open admission in this very report that Japan-born coaches are hardly shining examples of integrity themselves, and need performance reviews. There's more, but for now, let me pause to ask you this. Does the wider sumo fan public really agree with this declaration of war on the Hakuho brand? Because, as you've likely guessed, the word fan in this report is used interchangeably with Japanese citizen. But Sumo, seeking bubble-era highs, made a conscious choice to seek out international audiences in the 1980s through overseas TV deals, overseas tours, and increased recruitment of overseas wrestlers. As a result, in this internet age, a large portion of the fanbase, and especially casual fanbase, is non-Japanese, and with very different expectations, not least over how the likes of Hakuho should be treated. There is no mention of overseas or foreign-born fans in the report. We are assumed simply not to exist. I think our comments box proves otherwise, though. So why not make a bit of history and comment on the report that none of us were expected to notice?